So, welcome to our February 2025 third Thursday training. My name is Cindy Coleman, and I serve the Presbytery as Connectional Presbyter and Stated Clerk, and my pronouns are she, her, plus. I'm going to open us in prayer before we dive into our program. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, all through Scripture, you orient us. You call us to care for the widow, the orphan, the stranger in our midst. You tell us through the words of Jesus to act as neighbors, not to wonder who is our neighbor, but to act as neighbors. You command us to love you and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And yet we struggle with that in the church, and we need your guidance and help and support. And in these difficult days when the political climate is fraught and our neighbors are being targeted, we struggle with how can we help protect? How can we help support? How can we be active in loving our neighbors the way you have called us to? So be with us in this time as we receive some tools and information, as we perhaps hear your call to be active in our love in new or deeper or broader ways. Guide us so that our neighbors know that we can be relied on and that our love will be tangible and seen in their lives. We ask this in your holy and life-giving name. Amen. So tonight we have the pleasure and joy of welcoming Mike Brickner. He is the executive director of the Delaware chapter of the ACLU. I had the pleasure of sitting in on a Know Your Rights presentation yesterday here in Wilmington that he helped lead, which was fantastic, great information. So I'm excited to turn this over to Mike. Just a reminder, we're going to hold our questions until the end of his presentation, at which point we'll stop recording and we can get into the ifs, wheres, whats, whys, all that good stuff. So, Mike, welcome to this fun and fabulous group from Newcastle Presbytery in Delaware and the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
Yes, I am so glad to be here with all of you today, and it's nice to see a few familiar faces as well. So again, my name is Mike Brickner. I use he, him pronouns. I'm executive director of the ACLU of Delaware. I've been in this position for almost 5 years now, but I've worked for the ACLU in one form or another for about the past 20 years or so. So I've been in this fight for a long time, seen a lot in this country. Seeing some new things these days, but really glad to be working for an organization that I think is really at the forefront of protecting our liberties. And I know many of us have had a whole range of emotions and things going through our minds since November, and those have probably only intensified since January 20th. And I'm feeling overwhelmed too. I'm feeling fearful too. I'm feeling angry too, right? And so for today, especially because I'm talking to so many great faith leaders here, I'm going to focus my conversation on two different tracks. So I'm going to show you some stuff on our website that will help you to get active and might be things that you want to use for your congregations. And as Cindy kind of previewed, we did a Know Your Rights specifically for immigrant communities yesterday, and we've been doing these all across the state. And so I'm also going to go through some of that training as well so that you all have some of that basic information. But as I'm going to show you, you can actually request a very similar training for your congregations, for your community members, and that this might be something that you can do to help to ensure people know what their rights are, which is incredibly important right now. A lot of times I find that people have their rights violated because they didn't know what their rights were in the first place, and they didn't feel empowered to advocate for themselves, to say that they are not complying with something that a law enforcement officer or another, government authority is telling them to do. And making sure that they have that information can help to protect them, help to slow up some of these unjust machines that are running through our communities right now, and can help us also feel like we're doing something to benefit our neighbors in a time that I think feels, very hopeless for a lot of people. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen first and take you to the ACLU of Delaware website. And I'm going to actually take you to the home screen because I'm going to pretend like I'm a brand new member to the ACLU and just show you some of the really important things that are there right now. I'm going to link directly to the things I'm going to show you, so you can go to those directly here while we're here. But first and foremost, this is the home screen. The most important thing that you're going to see here right at the very front is a way that you could actually take action right now. So we have an action alert that's going to Governor Meyer. It's in English, and also if you click on here, it'll take you to the Spanish version, so you can send an action alert in Spanish. But what it's asking Governor Meyer to do right now is to issue his own executive order. We've seen the president issue lots of executive orders, but there is actually a lot that Governor Meyer can help to protect by issuing his own executive order. First of all, he can say that he wants to ensure that he is not cooperating with any sort of unconstitutional or anti-civil liberties action that the federal government employs. So if that is doing these mass immigration raids that are using, racial profiling and violating people's Fourth Amendment rights, that he can say, look, the federal government may be able to come in here and try and do that, but I'm not going to give any time from the Delaware State Police. I'm not going to allow the Delaware Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Labor, or other people to turn over data about individuals. We're not going to help you. So he can say that, first of all. He can also say that we're not going to help you with other kinds of actions that they might be doing. So, there could be investigations into people who are trying to get gender affirming care in the state or reproductive health care in the state. And we can say, we're not going to cooperate with that. We can also say that we're not going to cooperate with investigations or threats against students and their right to learn. In addition to saying that we're not going to cooperate, he can also, and part of what we say here is that he can also proactively guarantee equal access to education. So he can call on the Attorney General to send out clarification to all of the school districts saying, we are guaranteeing equal access to education. This is what the Delaware State Constitution requires. And so there's no question about, yeah, we have to protect students of color. We have to protect LGBTQ students. We have to accommodate students with disabilities. I was reading an article in Delaware Online just today about this issue where we're hearing from school districts that have gotten now letters from the Department of Education that seem to be threatening that they might not be able to have certain clubs at their schools or certain school task forces or employee resource groups. So all of that stuff could be under threat, and the governor and the attorney general could help to protect that. But also, we're calling on him to also, put our money where our mouth is. That one of the things that we're worried about too are cuts to federal health care. And right now, we allow for health care to pay for we allow state Medicaid dollars to pay for abortion care. We just enacted that this past year. We also allow money to pay for gender affirming care. but we think that with potential cuts to other healthcare programs, we might need more and to help to pay for some of the practical costs of those cares. So if somebody has to travel to Delaware or do other types of things, we want to make sure that they're able to get here. So you can go to this link. I'm going to provide it in a second, but again, it's right on the front site. I'm using my wife's computer, so you can see she actually took action earlier. I don't do that, but she does. They already know what I think. But you can take action right here on the website. In addition, back at the front of the website, the other places that I want to encourage you to go to is under Our Work. And if you look here, there's a tab called Know Your Rights. So that will take you to all of our hub pages around Know Your Rights. So again, one of the things we're going to be talking about today, Know Your Rights with ICE and law enforcement for immigration community. So if you click here, it's going to take you to a whole hub page with tons and tons and tons of resources. The page is in Spanish, so you can click there and access it in Spanish. There are videos on here. There's all sorts of sections around what to do if ICE comes to your door. What if ICE forces their way into your home? What if ICE stops you in a public place? How do you create an emergency plan? It also gives legal resources and various immigration law firms in Delaware. So again, lots of helpful things. We also have that for service providers. We have information about immigrant students and their families. But then we also have other issues. So we have information for LGBTQ rights, for employment, housing, and public accommodations. But then also for young people, what are trans and gender diverse students' rights when they're in school? We have your First Amendment rights, because a lot of us might be out protesting and demonstrating a lot more. And then we also have information around breastfeeding and communal spaces. So all of those are things that you can get information on. And the nice thing is that beyond that, you can also go then to the Take Action page up at the top here. So I clicked on that. And on that, you can actually see you can request ACLU of Delaware materials. So if you click there, you can scroll down and you can actually say, oh, yeah, I really want some of those First Amendment cards. I'd like 25 of them. And you know what? Also, I kind of need the Know Your Rights cards, but in Spanish. I'll take 50 of those. I also want some Haitian Creole. I think I need actually 75 of those. And then also, gosh, I would really love this sticker about immigrants belong in Delaware because I'd love some swag that I can hand out in the community. So I'm going to get 25 of those. I just put in my information. Gee, my wife is ordering again. Uh, and then I can say, can I pick it up from our office? We're at the community service building. If not, we can send them to you. When you need them, any additional information, you just click and submit. It comes to our office and we will fulfill those requests for free for you. In addition, you can also request trainings. So if you would like to provide Know Your Rights information to some of your constituents, you can get those trainings. So again, it kind of talks through, usually we require about 60 minutes and at least 15 participants. We can do them virtually or in person. We can also do them in English and Spanish. If you'd like them in another language, we can usually find a translator to translate from English for us. But then down here, you can select which of the topics you would like that Know Your Rights presentation on. And then just put, organization name, what day you would like to have it, what time, number of participants, location, any additional information. Again, my wife is a big requester of information, and you can just submit that right through there. So again, very easy way for you to be able to request all of that different stuff. And I'm going to click here and give all of those different places for ACLU of Delaware. I know you were also very active in the chat, so thank you for that, Cindy. But hopefully that provides you with some concrete things that you can do, right? So, getting that alert out to your members who want to take action to encourage our governor to, stand up for civil rights and civil liberties, getting information out to your communities. Again, really, really important stuff. And we're happy to go anywhere in the state of Delaware. Sorry to those of you that might be in Maryland, but we could maybe help get stuff out there too. Especially the immigrant rights stuff. Actually, most of that should be good no matter what state you're in. So seriously consider if there's something that we can provide you. We may be able to provide that across state. Um, any questions folks have about that before I move into kind of the abbreviated Know Your Rights so you can kind of see some of the stuff around immigrant rights that we're talking about right now? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, but this time I'm going to go to my PowerPoint. There we go. And let me go to the slideshow. So this is, as Cindy mentioned yesterday or earlier, she was at a training yesterday. We've been doing a series of Know Your Rights, specifically for allies for immigrant communities, but we're also doing them for the actual communities themselves. So we're doing them in Spanish and Haitian Creole specifically. We aren't advertising those on our website because we want to keep those safe for those communities and not have like any bad actors show up who might, harass people or cause them to be fearful. But we are advertising the allies ones, and they've gone really well. Yesterday we had a standing room only one. We did a virtual one that had over 200 people. Next week we're going to be in Lewis, and we're going to have, I think, over 100 people are RSVP'd for that one right now. But I want to go through a little bit what this Know Your Rights training looks like, and also then hopefully maybe answer some questions you have about how you might be able to manage your spaces or what you might be able to do if immigrations and customs enforcement comes to one of your congregations or somewhere in your community. So, the first thing I'm going to say is maybe a little bit of an annoying one is that, a lawyer's favorite answer to any question is always, it depends, right? So you might have a very specific question of like, well, what if this happens with this and with that? And my answer is probably going to be, well, it depends, right? It may depend on what this person does or that person does and what that specific instance was. And so, what I'm trying to do here is to give you, that basic information that you can use to hopefully be able to know the general parameters of what is legal and not legal. But if you have specific questions, it's always good to ask your own attorney to get that legal advice. And what I'm giving today should not be construed as legal advice. I'm always, required to say that. But let's talk about what are your basic rights during interactions with law enforcement. So, number one, if you watch any kind of television procedural show, you know you've got the right to remain silent. And I want to like really emphasize here because this is something that I think a lot of people, if you go on social media, I see this a lot. People will say, "Well, those immigrants, they're not citizens, so they don't have rights." Well, people should read the Constitution because the Constitution is very specific, where it says all people or all persons and then all citizens. And so it's very specific about here is what the rights are that are reserved for citizens. And frankly, most of those special rights are really around voting. And then here are all the rights that are for all people that are impacted by our country. And so this means that, like any person in the United States, can't be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment, right? Or we can't just violate their Fourth Amendment rights, or they have the right to freedom of speech. And so, similar to how we all have the right to remain silent, somebody who's undocumented or somebody who is documented, they also have the right to remain silent. So if somebody comes up to you, you don't have to answer questions from law enforcement, and you can't be punished for refusing to answer. You don't have to discuss your immigration status with any police, immigration officers, or other officials. You shouldn't lie, right? If you lie and you're later caught having lied to them, that is when you could get into trouble. But you can simply say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. You also have the right to clearly say that you don't consent to a search of you or your belongings, right? That the police don't have the, God-given right just to search any individual at any time. Now, if they believe that you could be a danger to the community, like you have a gun on you or something like that, they can say, okay, we have reasonable suspicion to search that person. But if you don't consent to that search, you should say that and say it clearly. We see so many of those nice little police body-worn cameras these days that a lot of times when these types of situations come out, it's really important for the person to say clearly, I don't consent to this, because later on, maybe the police officer didn't have any probable cause to search you. Maybe there was no reason. And so if they did find something on you later, that evidence could be tossed out and you could have some sort of, civil rights claim because they violated your rights because you clearly said, I don't consent to this search. The other right that you have is the right to request to speak to a lawyer. Now, this is a little bit different, but again, the things that you want to remember are, I'm retaining my right to remain silent. I don't consent to the search, and I want to speak to an attorney. Now, in criminal cases, if you are being arrested for a crime, you are entitled to a free attorney, right? That they will find a public defender that they will put for you. If you are a person who is arrested for an immigration violation, even though people say immigrants, undocumented immigrants are criminals, they are not. It is actually a civil violation. And so, in the civil court context, you have a right to have an attorney, but not a free attorney. So you have to pay for the attorney. But you can absolutely say, I want to speak to a lawyer, and say, I'm not going to speak until I connect with my attorney. And the immigration officials have to work to connect you to that attorney. So the other thing that you have the right to do is you have the right to record interactions with ICE or any other law enforcement. Again, we see the body-worn cameras, but we've also seen a lot of those cell phone videos. And you have a First Amendment right in a public space to take out your phone and to video record what's happening in that public space. Now, you should not interfere. If you're a bystander and ICE is trying to arrest or detain somebody, you should not interfere, but you have the absolute right to stand there in a public space and record that person. The police are not allowed to come and break your phone or come and delete the video or the pictures off of your phone, right? So again, it is your right to be there and to record. You can all, it is important that you can let the agents know that you're getting out your phone and that you're recording them, especially if you're the person that they're questioning, because obviously they might be concerned if you're going into your pockets or things like that. You want to make sure that they know what your movements are for. Okay, so that's the basic rights if you're interacting with these folks. But let's talk about your rights for public places. So in those public places, we have to delineate what's a public place and what's a private space. So generally, ICE can enter into public spaces without a warrant or permission. So that means, like, if I'm a restaurant owner and Cindy can come and eat at my restaurant and she can sit at my table in my dining room and order a pizza, then ICE can come in there and they can congregate in that area too. Now, there are maybe some limits to that, in that can they congregate for like 8 hours in your restaurant? Maybe not. But can they come in and, do a little walk around and a search and all of that? Yes. However, the people in that public space do not have to talk to ICE, right? That they have no obligation to speak to ICE. And that you want to be careful about what information is visible or could be overheard with law enforcement. So if ICE or law enforcement come in, you don't want to start like talking about illegal things or anything like that within earshot. But let's talk about private spaces because I can go in, or Cindy can come into my restaurant and she can order a piece of pizza in my dining room. But if Cindy all of a sudden just decides she's going to barge into the kitchen and, like, sit in front of the pizza oven and start like taking out pizzas and she's not an employee, I'm going to say, "Excuse me, Cindy, what are you doing here? This is a private space. Get the heck out." And so that's an example of where ICE cannot go unless they have a signed and valid judicial warrant, which we're going to show you an example of after this, or permission from the business. So if I, as the restaurant owner, say, "Oh yeah, sure, ICE, you can come back here," then they can come in, and again, they're kind of like vampires. Once you invite them in, you can't kick them out. And so it's important that if they're trying to enter a private space and they don't have that signed judicial warrant, say, "This is a private area. You can't enter without a valid warrant. Do you have a warrant?" And if they don't, tell them, "Goodbye. Thank you for playing." So here's some practical tips on what to do if ICE shows up. So number one, I want you to think about yourselves as superheroes, right? I was gonna say Wonder Twin powers activate, but this is a trio, so Wonder Triplets activate. But we want you to work as a team, and ideally, you might have three people on that team because each person here has a role. So number one, you have someone who talks to ICE and reviews the warrant. So if you think about in that restaurant context, that first person is the person who's most likely to encounter ICE. So at my pizza restaurant, it's probably the host that's there, right? And that the host is going to be the first person to see them. And so they're going to say, "Oh, hi, ICE officers. What are you doing here? Do you have a warrant?" And they're also trained to look at the warrant to maybe verify that warrant and also let the other people at the place of business know, "Hey, there's ICE officers here. We need to take action." Because you have the two other people, one who calls your lawyer, because it is important to contact your lawyer, I think, as soon as possible. We're going to talk a little bit later. It'd be great if the lawyer can like come there on their, white steed and rescue you right in the moment. But also they might not be able to get there, but putting them on notice that you have ICE agents at your church or at your place of business or your school or whatever helps them to start to get up to speed and helps them to start to prepare whatever they need to do to help you out in that situation. But then third person is maybe most important, is someone who records and documents the encounter. Because let's be honest, if ICE ever knocks on your door, it is going to probably be one of the worst days of your life, right? Whether or not you're an immigrant or not, it's just going to be very stressful and chaotic. And you are probably not going to be able to focus a lot on the details. And you're going to need to have somebody who can pull out their phone or pull out their notebook or both and keep as many notes as possible and keep a cool head and know all the things that are going to be happening or that did happen in that encounter. So, other things that you can do that are, I think, really important is try and limit ICE's exposure to the building. So, again, in the restaurant, the person is coming, the ICE agents are coming in because the host isn't standing outside. It would be awfully cold and cruel to do that in this weather, right? Um, but like, let's say you're at a church where maybe the doors are typically locked if you're not having public worship, right? Like somebody rings the doorbell, or you're at a school and those doors are normally locked. Somebody knocks or rings the intercom or whatever. You don't have to immediately let ICE in. You can speak to them from the outside and say, "I understand you're here. I understand you want access. Can you slide the judicial warrant under the door?" That is perfectly fine for you to do. You do not have to immediately open the door and let them in. You can say, "I need to see the warrant first, verify that it's there. And if it's not, they have to go," right? You can tell them to leave. If they do come to the public area, like in my pizza parlor, then the host and the other employees would be the ones to say, "Okay, you can be in the public area, but these areas are private areas and you're not allowed to go unless you have that judicial warrant," right? So I'm going to show you a picture of the warrant in just a moment, but you have a right to see the warrant. So ask for that immediately. You can take a picture of whatever document ICE shows you. So again, if they wave something in your face, say, no, I need to take a look at it. I'm taking a picture of it. I'm going to text it to my lawyer or whatever. And that is absolutely fine to do. So this is what a valid judicial warrant looks like. And you're going to see a couple of things. So, and I figured this out from yesterday because I didn't realize that it had all this cool circling going on. So the first thing you're going to see in this red circle is that it was issued by a court. You see it says United States District Court for the Eastern District of California, right? So you can see this is something that came from an actual court, right? So that's important. Secondly, you're going to see, oh, there are attachments to it, attachments A and attachments B. And so those will be like pages on the back of it that might be stapled or paper clipped. And that's where you can confirm it's for you and for your address, right? So it should have a name on it and it should have the address of where they're actually going. If it doesn't have the name and the address, then it's also not a valid warrant, right? And then lastly, it has to be signed by that judge, right? It has to be signed in order to be actually valid. So you want to make sure that that signature is there. This is important because to get a valid warrant from a court, takes a lot of due process, takes a lot of evidence. They have to really show to a court there is a reason we have to go into this place and search this place. That is a very high bar of evidence. And these are very hard for ICE agents to get. 9 times out of 10, at least, you are not going to see one of these judicial warrants. Instead, oh, and also it's going to say it's a search and seizure warrant. Sorry, I meant to see that last one. So it should also say that specifically. It's a search warrant. But instead, a lot of the things that you're going to see are this is ICE form I-200. There's also I-205, which looks very similar to this. This is merely a internal document that ICE creates itself. And you see it looks pretty official, right? It says warrant for arrest of alien, right? Ugh, I hate that term. That's what it says. But it merely says, oh, we can arrest this person. It is not issued by a court. It's not signed by a judge. It's just something that ICE creates internally to look really official. And so knowing the difference between these two, because this provides them no legal basis to come into your business or your church or your school or your home. The other one does. And so, again, this is really, really important. And Cindy, I'm happy to, I think you might have actually gotten already, hopefully, the link from yesterday with the presentation. Feel free to send that out to the rest of the congregants too, because we want to get this information out there so you actually can have this information and see these two different things. But again, this really doesn't mean a whole lot legally. The court warrant does. The judicial warrant does. So again, knowing the difference between these two, really, really important. As I mentioned, if ICE shows up, call your lawyer as soon as they arrive. Hopefully, your lawyer will arrive, but if not, I know lawyers live far away. They've got other stuff going on. That's totally fine. This is like gold standard. So, next standard might be, can the lawyer be on speakerphone with you, right? That's totally fine if the lawyer wants to listen in that way and advise you that way. If not, again, at least you're putting the lawyer on notice. Hey, I have this situation. As soon as you're able to come, please help me. Just make sure, really the most important thing I can say here is make sure you don't sign anything. You or any other staff members or any other folks there, don't sign anything without a lawyer reviewing it first. The ICE agents are going to pressure you. Oh, this is just a simple thing. Everybody has to sign it. Da, da, da. We don't want to have to wait. They're going to pressure you. And you need to say, I can't sign anything unless I have a lawyer look at it first. Again, important, document the encounter. We talked about that, recording the conversation with ICE. You can follow ICE wherever they go, whether it's in public or private, at your place of business or your church or your school. And you can document any damage that ICE caused. So if they, do any damage to your office or do any damage to you or anybody else there, you can document that. Take pictures, take video. So again, back to the practical tips again, how to prepare in case ICE shows up. So biggest things are practice, practice, practice. You got to determine who your team is, who your squad is, and who should be on that three-person team. Now, again, I'm saying all of this is gold standard, right? It may be that you're going to say, you know what, on any given day, I'm the only person at the office. That's okay. But just know that you as that person, you're gonna have to be every woman, right? You're gonna have to be every role and take on all three of those roles and know there are distinct things that I need to do for each one of those things. Or maybe there's only two of us, or maybe, people have different shifts or whatever. But, try and plan. The ideal would be if you can have three people that have those distinct roles. But make sure staff know who to refer to in case of a raid. So, like, just make sure people know, hey, if somebody knocks on the door and say they're from Immigration Customs Enforcement, you need to call Cindy right away. Wherever she is, if she's in the building, if she's not in the building, you need to let her know ASAP. Train the staff on their rights again so they know that they have the right to remain silent, all of that. And then make sure that staff know not to run or resist the officers and practice, 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 practice it, right? Make sure everyone is comfortable. And that again, like there might be days where like normally, I'm the front desk receptionist, but I'm not there that day. And so, Cindy also needs to know that role because she might be doing it that day. So again, just make sure you have coverage and that everybody in the office kind of knows the rules of the road with this. You can also prepare your building. So when I mention like the private versus the public spaces, some of your questions right now might be around like, well, how do I really know it's a private space? So there are ways that you can put protections down to make it seem more like a private space and really reinforce that it is in fact a private space. So number one, if the door is locked, it's probably a private space, right? Because the public can't just magically go in there. So if you're locking your doors to your offices, if you're locking, doors to whole parts of your building that are normally private and only employees have keys or whatever, that better puts into place that it will be a private space. But also having signs put up clearly also helps, right? So Cindy should know that at my pizza place, the kitchen was employees only because I had a big employees only sign out there, right? So if I put up signage, that helps me to better articulate and prove that this is in fact a private space. One other thing, we just got them in yesterday. We have now big poster signs with Know Your Rights information. We have the English in, the Spanish are going to be in any day now. They might have been delivered even today, with information about reminding people about their rights. It is your First Amendment right to educate people about their rights. And so there's nothing wrong with you telling them what their constitutional rights are. And so you should feel perfectly free and empowered to do that. I'm just going to say this really briefly. This is also a time where you can start thinking about your own data collection and retention. I can't imagine for any church why you would need to document somebody's immigration status, right? I can't think of any reason to, but maybe, 50 years ago, somebody started that practice and you started doing it in some like notebook or whatever. It's in some old computer program. Who knows? People do crazy things out there. Now is a time to really look and say, do we really need that data? Well, if we don't, then maybe we should just start deleting it now and no longer keep it because, keeping that data sitting around is an invitation for somebody to come in and potentially seize that data, right? And so if we have practices where we're saying, yeah, we're just not going to collect certain types of data, or we're going to have regular intervals where we're going to delete all of this type of data, then you're better protecting people in the long term as well. Again, you can also change your employee manuals and all of the policies to reflect this stuff around data collection, retention, how to respond to ICE, public and private spaces. If you have those actual policies in place, that's even better. I'm gonna go through, these are some special slides around like special spaces. So people have been asking a lot about schools. On that data collection piece, Delaware schools should not be asking about a student's or family's immigration status. There's no reason to keep it because children are entitled to education no matter their status. So if your school is asking that, you should seriously interrogate why they are and let us know that. Because again, they can't deny that. In addition, schools can't disclose personal information without consent. That's because of FERPA, which is the National Data Protection Law. And so, if they request access to student records, they have to have a valid court order or subpoena that is in compliance with all those federal laws. So, again, if you're at a school, you can't just turn over all this information, and ICE has to have all of this stuff that has, gone through the judicial process to show that they actually need that information. And again, they're supposed to allow parents and students the time to challenge and have notice that their information might be disclosed. So next is one you're all probably very interested in. I will just say, it's not the most rosy of picture though. So information for places of worship. Unfortunately, churches or other places of worship don't really have a better status than other public-private spaces. So many churches have said, we're declaring ourselves a sanctuary. And I think that's great, actually. I think more places should do it. I think it's a great message for our immigrant community that you are in solidarity with them. And so for any of you that have or are considering doing so, wonderful. And unfortunately, though, like if ICE comes in with a valid judicial warrant, that doesn't protect you legally by just declaring yourself a sanctuary, unfortunately. And so that doesn't prevent them from entering your building. Now, all the same rules apply that I talked about before if they don't have a judicial warrant. But again, just the fact that you have said you're a sanctuary does not necessarily fully protect you. Um, the other thing is like with sanctuary, a lot of people say then, oh, I'm going to conceal or harbor people. Again, it does prevent you or prohibit you from doing those types of things. I would also say though, like there are some, I think, practical ways around that. One of our staff said, "Yeah, well, you can't knowingly conceal, harbor, shields, or transport somebody if you don't know what their status is, right?" And again, there's almost no reason for we as church officials to ask for somebody's immigration status, right? So I'm just providing them refuge and support just because they're a human being. And I don't need to know whether they're a citizen, documented or undocumented, right? So there are maybe some ways to help protect yourself. But again, I just want to point out like there's no special power, unfortunately, for churches opposed to other types of spaces. Um, Offering sanctuary to an undocumented immigrant could put your tax exempt status at risk. It's always good to consult with an attorney. But, one thing that I said to folks yesterday, and this is something that I've said for the 20 plus years that I've been at the ACLU, is that there is a long-standing practice of civil disobedience in this country, right? I will not tell you to break laws. I'm here to tell you what the laws are. I do this when I talk to protesters, and I have protesters who tell me, we're going to protest across the highway. And my answer to them is if you do that, you may be liable to the police arresting you and criminal charges. And that could happen, right? And those protesters will say, we don't care. We're protesting this really important issue and we're going to take the risk. Similarly, if you try and offer sanctuary and hide an undocumented immigrant or transport them or try and disrupt a valid ICE judicially sanctioned investigation, that could bring liability to you. It is not my place, though, to tell you that that is something you should or should not do. That is something you have to decide as an individual, right? So that's my spiel on that. Just real briefly on medical facilities, very similar to schools in that there's a lot of privacy things with HIPAA that protects people's rights. So again, there are extra levels of protection there to keep people's personal information personal. Lastly, if you think your rights have been violated. Call me. I'll put my cell phone in the chat. But no, call the ACLU. Number one, gather as much information as possible. That means like the officer's badge number, what agency they're from, patrol car numbers, contact information from any witnesses. Make sure, again, you're recording, taking photographs, all of that. But again, you can reach out to the ACLU of Delaware. We really love when people can submit our online form. You can also send a letter to the office. Certainly, you can call and email, and we'll reach out to you with this information. But we do like to have everything in writing as much as we possibly can. One, it helps our legal staff because we do have a small legal staff be able to kind of pace all the complaints that they're getting through. But it's also important because when you write it down, it really help. I find it helps to get all of the information out. And for us to decide, like, can we help this person or can we not help this person? Having all as much information as we possibly can get up front is really, really helpful to us. So with that, there's this QR code, but it takes you all the stuff that I already linked you to, so you don't need that. So I'm going to stop the share and ask if anybody has any questions.
And before we go to questions, we're going to stop the recording. I did put the presentation in the chat so you can see that, as well as links to the Maryland versions of what we heard about for Delaware. So we're going to take time for questions, but first, thank you so much, Mike. So deeply appreciate everything you and the ACLU are doing across the country, but especially appreciate you being available to us tonight.